Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 166 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. Today, we're having our regular monthly discussion with our colleague Kevin Gregg of Immigration Review Podcast to do over, just federal court cases and kind of recap some ideas that we've gone through, in 2020 and thoughts about 2021. I think you'll enjoy it. I had a good time going through it. Before we start, I want to remind people that a couple of things, actually, listeners. One is at the Champions for Freedom marriage immigration course that goes over marriage adjustment, consular processing, and admissibility, affidavit support, all that training for immigration lawyers is available. Please email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com if you're interested in getting more information about that program. It's for purchase. It's not a free program, but it's definitely training that breaks down the system. I think you'll enjoy it and you'll learn a lot from it, especially if you're, just out of law school learning about immigration, or if you're transitioning from a non-immigration law background and you're listening to this, which is a big part of my viewers, and trying to learn about immigration. I think it'll break things down to you and, go over all the years of stuff I learned in one place. Secondly, I want to thank our sponsor, DocuWise. DocuWise, the immigration software, all-in-one software. I always think about it as a form software, but it's much more than that. It has even CRM type features, all sorts of different stuff, and they're constantly coming out with different features to help you be able to, provide the best service for your clients. It's a growing service that's going to be taken over pretty soon, I'm sure. If you want to get an extra discount, 10% off, an additional 10% off the annual plan, just go to www.docawise.com/immigration lawyers podcast and use the code immigration lawyers podcast there, and you will be able to get that percentage off. I want to thank again DocuWise for sponsoring us in the last few months. It's such a wonderful program, and I'm really happy I use them myself. And last but not least, if you're listening to this, if you're a regular viewer or if you're a new viewer, I'd appreciate a 5-star review on any website, iTunes, or wherever you're listening, so other people can learn about it as well. The algorithm will help bring it up so people can learn about the podcast, support it. The more listeners we have, the more stuff I can put out. But I want to thank everyone again. We'll probably have one more episode until the end of the year. But if you don't hear that one, I want to wish you all a happy new year. And with that, let's get it started.
Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast, a part of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, an education and marketing publication for the immigration law community that includes legal updates, interviews, discussions, education and CLE material, and more. Note that the information here is for general education only and not intended as individual legal advice. The laws change frequently, so you should consult with an attorney about your specific case. For more information, please visit immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another great episode with our colleague Kevin Gregg, a partner at Kurzban, Tetzelli, and Pratt. We do our regular monthly talking about federal court updates. So we're going to talk about what's happened last month in December 2020, along with some ideas and just discussion about, what's going to happen, what happened this year, just the big trends and stuff, and just our thoughts on everything. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on again.
No problem. I've stayed in Florida and now in San Diego for the last couple of years. So I always like the holiday time in those climates. San Diego's pretty nice. How's LA?
LA's good. It got a little cold for LA, that is. Yesterday I was wearing, or day before, I think I was wearing shorts and going for a walk and stuff. So it's generally good. Just it gets hot and cold quick, which is annoying. And that's what causes people to catch colds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
A quick note, I want to remind listeners too that you have an awesome podcast, Immigration Review, which does a much deeper dive into is it every week it's published?
It's every week. Yeah, it's a labor of love.
That's intense. But thank you so much for taking time out and adding a fifth week here. But let's jump into it.
Well, before we do, I want to let you know, actually, I've got you, I got a shout out for you in this week's episode, because I saw on Facebook, you alerted me to the fact that the Ninth Circuit had vacated matter of ERAL, which is the case about Colombian social group landowners.
Yeah.
The Ninth Circuit just did it in one page. I mean, I can't even catch those things if they're not publishing it. So thank you for that. I mean, you talk about what happened this year.
Yeah.
Obviously, the virus is the main thing that happened this year, which is crazy in an election year. But I'm flying to Boston in a week for a bond hearing, which is crazy, right? Not to mention they've got 10 feet of snow. But it's just, I don't know. I always try to remember the courts, the detained courts have not really stopped at all.
Yeah.
There's people just in detention facilities all over the country.
You know,
My guy's got no criminal conviction.
I'm surprised they're not allowing people to do telephonic for bond hearings.
They are, and I could, but I don't know, right? If it was your brother, would you want an attorney there?
Exactly. Yeah.
I would. And I understand that they might actually not even let me in the same courtroom as the judge. So I might fly to Boston to be in the courtroom next door, but I'm
Yeah.
going to present witnesses and I don't know, right? Not even seeing the judge, at least that way I can see the judge in a video. The guys, I don't know. If it was my brother, I would want the
Yeah.
attorney there. And I know the family does too.
You know, this is a major issue because I see in criminal courts a lot to it, and in removal defense, people are frustrated the courts are being open. I understand, but in the case of being detained, where your freedom is literally taken away and you're caged, we just have to keep those courts open. And then the next level of that is do the best search you can because the person's being kept in a cage. You know, you're right. It just you can't half-ass it, if you will.
I agree, and I think that the detained courts do have to remain open. My beef is with the fact that we keep detaining individuals without crimes and
That's
without
great.
violent crimes in a pandemic because it could be a death sentence. If you're going to detain them, yeah, you got to keep the courts open, but I don't think we should be detaining as many people with a pandemic. But that's just me.
That's one of the craziest things about this current administration is they're talking about removing as many people as possible, but they included low priority people who are getting NTAs.
Oh
So
yeah.
backing up the court and it's grinding things to a halt. So it's such a mess. Like they're trying to do one thing, but they're creating all sorts of problems and delaying what their goal is too. And so when you look at President Obama, which had high removal numbers, his focus was on people who have criminal history and stuff. And that's what should focus realistically, logically should be on it. But it seems they're just throwing a big net and just grabbing everybody.
It was crazy. I mean, I started my career in the San Diego court, as I'm sure I've said on your show before, as an attorney advisor in the court, and we worked hard. There was not a focus to remove as many people as possible, but we worked very hard. That was from 2013 to 2015, and I knew attorney advisors over this administration, quite a few of them, and you can read about a lot of it. I mean, they were clearly trying to get rid of the backlog in immigration court with all the numbers, with the case completion, and just making the life miserable for some of these judges and attorney advisors for a variety of reasons, all for it to go to naught with the pandemic. I mean, the backlog is probably double what it was, and I guess that's no fault of the administration's really, but it just, I don't know. Was it all pointless pumping through all these cases to get rid of a backlog if just one virus can blow it all up again? I don't have a solution to that, but it
No.
does seem like a lot of hard work all gone to waste over the last couple of years.
We'll see what happens in the new administration if there's going to be some wide scale amnesty or not. I don't know if it's one of those things like U.S. was really afraid of communism in the 60s and stuff, and they brought in Nixon, who was Republican, who they thought was going to be anti-communist, and he was able to like work with China and open things up. And then Reagan, a Republican, came in. He was able to do amnesty because it throws people off when one of their own side switches or something like that. But with Biden come in, and if the Republicans win the Senate, I'm not sure really amnesty or something is going to be possible to clear up that's the solution, clear up this backlog, trying to like fix people with no criminal history, been here for 10 years, whatever the rules are that they make up. But realistically, to go through a system, I think it just doesn't make any sense at this point. The backlog is so crazy.
Yeah, I'm no political commentator. I think amnesty is dead in the water. I mean, the DACA people will probably have something. Hopefully, the TPSers get
Mhm.
included in that. I know Marlene Bastian and FAM in Miami are doing a great job to make Washington not forget about the Haitian TPS holders and all TPS holders and link it to DACA. So hopefully there, but I don't know. I don't think we're a country that has a stomach for amnesty anymore.
Mm. I wasn't around during that time. I'm wondering what the mood was. I mean, in the 90s in California, it became really anti-immigrant. We passed some stuff here when I was a kid. I wasn't really up on what's going on now when I look back. But in the 80s, I don't know what the vibe was to be able to pull off something like that. I guess really like a Reagan kind of person could do that, who had huge, wide scale majority win. I mean, Biden won, it seems, but it's the country's half half, and the other half seems really anti-immigrant. Plus the unions, this is like very interesting going to politics. Democrats were the base. The base was unions, but it seems they switch, and the union people are now, blue collar jobs are switching Republican, kind of Trump-ish, if not just Republican. There's a huge shift in what's happening with the political party. So we'll see how that all works out, because Biden's kind of torn, because if he goes big immigration, unions aren't going to be happy with that. Even though the union base is small nowadays, you might see a comeback in unions. Who knows?
I I was born in 1986, so I guess I was born in amnesty, so I wasn't around either. But I don't know. I don't agree with this, but I think that a lot more than it was in the 80s, immigration is linked into the America's identity, such that there's a larger and larger segment of white people who are terrified of the browning of America, and on the statistics showing that white people will be, if white people aren't even an ethnicity, but that if they were, they would be a minority in America by whatever the year is, 2040 or whatever it is, and that's freaking out a lot of white people. I don't think that's going away. I am certainly not one of them, but I think that's a real thing. And so if you take it up, it becomes, unfortunately, more than just immigrants trying to live their life in America, and it becomes this whole, what is the soul of America? What should an American look like? And that's a fight that the Democrats don't want anything to do with, in my opinion.
And we have to have discussions. I think just in the cultural sphere, like things we do is talk about how is that going to look, how to make everyone comfortable with the ideas and move it forward, because that's the inevitable thing. I've started watching this one guy who's talking about, like, he was at Stratfor, which is this private intelligence group. Peter Kurzban, or it sounds like Kurzban, but can't say. But anyways, this guy was just talking about what's going to happen in the future with like globalism kind of falling apart, countries kind of, the global trade order kind of falling apart, America removing itself from the center stage of geopolitics abroad. And one big issue is demographic changes that are happening all over the world, where people are getting older but not replenishing, having more kids. So like in China, for example, the one child policy, it really screwed them over, because they have an aging population. They took all the people out of the countryside. So who's going to be working and consuming and having more kids and all this kind of stuff? That number is diminishing. So they really shot themselves in the foot with
Yeah.
that decision. And so America, one reason we have growth is because our population still grows, but a large chunk, if not a majority of that, is the influx of immigrants that other countries don't do, because they don't have an immigrant culture.
Right.
And so I think a key to our success will be people coming in continuously, especially the most adventurous kind of people that are willing to make the immigrant journey. So it just, the core of the U.S. success is going to be immigration. It just having people understand that and realizing there's shifts that happen, just like Ben Franklin didn't like the Germans coming in. We always have to adjust, but immigration is really key to how we're going to lead, be a successful country in the future.
Well, I'm on board. You and I just get on Zoom and we just preach to the choir. Two
Yeah, that's
immigration
true.
two immigration attorneys in their 30s just preaching to each other.
So let's jump to some cases. What do you have? What's the first one you have for us?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know you want to talk about a bit about the injunctions on the year, and we can do that in a bit. But before we get to it, I guess just the last month, there were two important decisions on ineffective assistance of counsel, which all of your attorney listeners obviously care about. The first was out of the board in matter of Melgar, and just boiled down, the board wants us to start lazadeing ourselves, file bar complaints against ourselves if we are going to be filing a motion to reopen based on ineffective assistance of counsel. And the same attorney filing that motion is the prior attorney. Now, that is a weird thing anyway, to say that you were mistaken the first time, but then again, everybody makes mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you aren't the second attorney filing the motion to reopen based on ineffective assistance of counsel, in some circuits, the former attorney can fall on their own sword, so to speak, and submit and say to the board or the immigration court, yeah, I messed up. No bar complaint, but yes, this was my mistake. And in matter of Melgar, the board would not have us do that. Now, don't get me wrong, as I said on the podcast, what constitutes ineffective assistance of counsel, as I read it, is a Sixth Amendment and maybe a due process issue. And so the circuit court has the last say on whether substantial compliance with matter of Lizada, including the filing of a bar complaint, is required. And I don't think matter of Melgar overturns anything in any circuit that says you don't have to file a bar complaint where the ineffective assistance counsel is plain on its face, such as with the Ninth Circuit. But I mean, there's some like there's quotes. Like here's the quote from Melgar: there may be valid reasons for not submitting a bar complaint, such as the death of a prior attorney or his disbarment. But the respondent has not stated one here except for a self-serving purpose, which we will not accept. I mean, it's all self-serving when there's a motion to reopen. That doesn't make it wrong if there is ineffective assistance of counsel. So that's the board trying to tighten up motions to reopen based on ineffective assistance of counsel, which no doubt, I mean, from my time with the court, they are abused, but also they serve a very important purpose. And then on the heels of matter of Melgar, the 11th Circuit published a case called Dos Santos v. U.S. Attorney General. And that case might be even more scary. And in this case, the prior attorney in immigration court conceded that Ms. Dos Santos had entered without inspection and admission and was therefore removable when she had been inspected and admitted. So, like, there's really no doubt that the attorney messed up and they made a concession that they shouldn't have made. And before the board and the appeal and then the 11th Circuit, and obviously it gets complicated, but the 11th Circuit would not allow Ms. Dos Santos to get out of that mistaken concession by her attorney, even though it was completely wrong. And in order to get around an attorney's concession, the 11th Circuit would have them make a showing that factors in all these three circumstances of whether the concession was untrue or incorrect, which was the case with Ms. Dos Santos, whether the concession was so unfair that it led to an unjust result, seemed to be the case in Dos Santos, and whether the concession was the result of unreasonable professional judgment. But then going on to unreasonable professional judgment, the 11th Circuit would kind of link it up to ineffective assistance of counsel, which requires a prejudice showing as well. And so in this case, the 11th Circuit said even if the attorney mistakenly conceded it, it didn't actually prejudice Ms. Dos Santos because she wasn't eligible for relief and all this stuff. And the quote in the 11th is, the concession must be so unfair that it led to an unjust result or that it was the product of unreasonable professional judgment. So again, tightening the noose on when respondents, when non-citizens can change the results in their case based on their attorney's mistake, both from the board and the 11th Circuit, kind of linked to ineffective assistance, kind of not. I don't know. They're kind of tough pills to swallow for me. If I was a non-citizen with an attorney, you try and hire the best attorney possible. But if that attorney makes a mistake, I think it's a legal fiction to believe that the non-citizen should be second guessing their attorney.
Yeah.
And be bound to everything they do and be questioning their judgment at every step of the way. That's why you hire an attorney, and it's gotten so complicated. But so that's a matter of Melgar and Dos Santos v. U.S. Attorney General from the last month.
Fun Merry Christmas.
Yeah, well, right. But yeah, I don't know.
In the Dos Santos case, she had entered with inspection and it was admitted. Would that have made a difference in the case? I read it. I kind of lost track of what was going on there.
Yeah. Well, so it wouldn't have at the time because they weren't married, because she wasn't married to a U.S. citizen, didn't have any grounds to adjust at the time. I believe she became adjustment eligible later, which is why the whole fight was there, to try and get it back before the immigration judge and to get rid of that concession.
So that's the thing. So when they said that injustice has to be really egregious, are they saying because at the time that the concession was made, it didn't make a difference? So, okay, not later on it became okay? Or
Yeah, they wouldn't look at it like that. At the time, it wasn't so egregious. At the time, it could have been a professional judgment, and they're they're conceding. The 11th Circuit is saying it could be a professional judgment because when you admit and concede, the IJ is happy, and they don't have to do. And so you might be trying to get into the immigration judge's good graces, which is of course not how the immigration judges ever look at it in court. They really get upset if you don't admit and concede. But the 11th Circuit is saying, well, you can admit and concede as a tactical decision. So maybe remind the judges that you're making a tactical decision not to admit and concede. But yeah,
Right.
the 11th Circuit, the board, they all want to go back in time at the point of the ineffective assistance,
Mhm.
at the point of the concession.
I guess
And so
that
that,
tactic
yeah.
strategy of always denying everything in an NTA would be the way to go.
Yeah, well, Dos Santos' decision is saying that is a tactical decision.
Yeah.
And you never know what's going to happen later. And, just one more point, because you said it was a bit of a negative, not trying to be negative, but so often in immigration. But as I said on the podcast, this attorney admission and concession thing, it applies equally to DHS. And I've used it against DHS. I've succeeded before, even before Dos Santos. DHS is in court representing their client, DHS, the trial attorney. And attorneys' admissions and concessions that your client is not a flight risk, that your client is not a danger, that your client warrants adjustment as a matter of discretion. All of those things that are said in open court are admissions and concessions. And a case like Dos Santos binds DHS equally.
Very
And so
interesting.
we shouldn't all be just not saying anything, right? Because that's crazy. But, if we're bound, so is DHS.
Mhm. Very interesting. Well, thank you with that. Are those the two cases, or is there another set?
Those were the two cases I was going to just talk about.
So yeah, 2020. I mean, obviously the virus was the big deal, but I mean, the federal courts have been working and chugging along. We had Supreme Court of this year that had the first recorded version, and someone flushed a toilet in the background. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know
that's right. Yeah.
which justice it was, but uh, there are a lot of crazy things that happen. One is the injunctions and the issues with national injunctions, and now they're trying to cut that down because when these injunctions like they go through and the next week they're undone, they're done again. District courts are doing them. Supreme Court, a couple of justices said we can't keep doing this back and forth. So that was a big thing, and that was related primarily towards a public charge going back and forth. There's a couple other ones, but what are your thoughts on district courts doing national injunctions, just stopping everything?
Yeah, I I hesitate before even speaking, right? Because who am I? I I clerked for a federal judge, and I'll tell you, I think it probably goes for all judges that they think long and hard before doing something like that,
Hmm.
because you're usually enjoining a state or federal government, which is the will of the people through elections.
Yeah.
And so I don't think any judge does that haphazardly. I think you need injunctions. It's kind of how the federal courts retained their equal branch in our constitution. But as all the immigration attorneys are seeing in the last 4 years, I mean, it makes chaos. Now, immigration attorneys have liked 90% of these immigration injunctions, but what's to say that other judges don't enjoin EPA actions that are saving the planet during the next term with judges that I don't agree with. So I do hesitate on that. I don't know the answer. I think that federal judges personally need to retain the ability to preliminarily enjoin, issue TROs, and permanent injunctions. I mean, that's the thing. So often, so many of these, if not all of them, are really in the preliminary injunction stage, which is even a higher. Well, it's not a higher, it's a different burden. And so much of this is just at the preliminary injunction stage. So don't take away the ability of federal courts to enjoin. I don't know, maybe mess with the preliminary injunction a bit, but also that serves a really important purpose because, once something happens, an injunction might be pointless.
Yeah.
I know us immigration attorneys are certainly happy that most of it happened, but we're also getting a little bit bite the hand that feeds you with the DACA decision now before Judge Hannon in that district in Texas. Maybe Judge Hannon enjoins DACA
Yeah.
as unconstitutional. I mean, it cuts both ways. That kind of makes me uncomfortable,
It's
just as a citizen.
Yeah, super messy. And then we have situations where one district court jurisdiction will, like in Chicago, won't have to public charge. The rest of the country does. There's confusion. Applicants will get pro se, get confused, get application rejected. The ninth,
That's insane. It's
yeah, ninth,
impossible to be pro se.
yeah. It's like it's so weird. And now we got all happy with DACA, advanced parole, everything coming back. But now, Texas might undo it. The district court there. It's such a peculiar thing. It's needed. I mean, we have the asylum injunctions that came into play too, which are really important. It's a bizarre situation, but there were big shifts there. And also on another, not outside of injunctions, we had some big decisions in employment-based cases and H-1B and stuff, undoing decisions by USCIS DHS, which were interesting. What are your thoughts on like asylum, how it's been treated in the last year in federal courts? I know it's a big focus of what you do.
I don't think it's
things, yeah.
I don't think it's any doubt that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and whoever's working for them are trying to kill asylum.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is something that's being properly enjoined because asylum is a creature of statute and they're trying to kill it through regulations and with red tape. And that's not, and the judges are recognizing that you can't do that. And so I don't know, America change is sometimes slow, and the progressives like myself are kind of seeing that that can be a good thing because when the change is against you, then you want it to be slow. And with the DACA decision and with other decisions, so much of this is, and with the TPS decisions, a lot of this is coming from the APA, which is just that, the administration didn't follow the Administrative Procedures Act properly to terminate DACA, to terminate TPS for Haiti, all that kind of stuff with some of the asylum stuff. And all the APA is that you didn't follow the correct procedure, that you did it too quickly. You didn't consider the correct factors, second guessing by a judge. And that, I mean, that is, to me, that's the flimsiest of bases, right? Because it necessarily means, like with the DACA, that you can go back and do it right again. You can, no one's saying you can't get rid of TPS, that you can't get rid of DACA. You just have to do it right. It all presupposed that Donald Trump would lose the election and you'd get in a new administration, because if he had won, they would have just done it all right again. So, I'm glad that we have these procedural mechanisms, the APA. It was the same with the fee increase, that they didn't consider the correct factors. I'm glad we have them, but it does make progress slow on both sides, and it makes it difficult for a president to change anything in one term.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good or bad. Certainly good with right now with immigration attorneys.
Yeah, I just said it seems all of it is a double-edged sword. It creates, in one sense, a lot of instability because you never know what's going on. And the other end, it's kind of is good because it could slow things down. Sometimes when you have a big ship like this moving around, you don't want to jump around too fast, even if it's like a just cause. Sometimes slower is better because they get wildly out of hand quickly. And just one last thing, which is my pet peeve topic, is the inconsistent dealing with TPS. And we saw more mixed results in federal courts. I bring this up a lot, of how they consider TPS an admission or not. The BIA has its own position. 3 circuit courts have said one. Some haven't said anything. We'll see what happens in the Supreme Court. I kind of hope they take this on so we have at least some guidance. Then again, I'm in the 9th Circuit, so I might as well be happy with what I'm getting right now. You're in the 9th Circuit now too. We have different ways of doing stuff here. But the inconsistencies on something like this is so weird that it's happening for me.
I just, as I hear myself, I'm a pain in the ass. Like the 6th, the 8th, the 9th, TPS is an admission. The board threw its hat in the ring, which is really pointless because they're owed no deference by anybody, but whatever. But they created the circuit split, even though it already kind of existed, with I think the 3rd in a footnote. But if TPS is an admission, right? Mm-hmm. Might that prevent future administrations from giving TPS? I mean, this is the conservative argument, that if TPS is permanent, like it has been for certain Somalis since 1992, and if it's an admission which gives individuals a path, does that make it such that maybe conservative administrations don't give necessary protection to people when they need it because they fear that those people will never leave. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that's a fear that shouldn't be a fear. But if you have those fears, it's probably a reason, for example, that Venezuela doesn't have TPS right now, because everything was pointing for Donald Trump's administration to give Venezuela TPS, especially with Florida in play. And they didn't do it. And I can't help but think that maybe it was because they thought that it would be permanent. So I don't know. I hope it's an admission because you got 400,000 individuals or so, many of them with families, and they need a place to be here.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Everything with immigration seems to have a cost.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of TPS, like you mentioned Somalia, we have El Salvador. It's been almost 20 years now. The temporary aspect, I mean, the name too, it's like, should we have deadlines on TPS? Because once someone's here for more than 2 years on TPS, they essentially become a resident. And how are you going to send it back? Because they're going to have
Right.
ties and work and home and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't really make sense over time to do that. So there has to be some sort of cutoff. But then again, that's hurtful too, because no one wants to go to like Somalia. El Salvador, it's kind of gotten better. I mean, it's still a mess. We'll declare asylum from there. But the earthquake, which was the reason I think that they started that, some
In
earthquake
Haiti.
there. Is that Haiti? What
Haiti
El
was the
Salvador was
earthquake.
okay.
There might have been more than one earthquake. Listen, we're lead counsel on the Sajay v. Trump case in the Second Circuit, currently on appeal. The only thing keeping the Haitian TPS holders with valid TPS, because the Ramos case in the Ninth was vacated by that panel. But it is a different interpretation of the statute. The statute, as we read it, as I think is a correct reading, says that even though there's a triggering, there are three or maybe four, I think there's three bases that TPS can be triggered, that a country can get it. One of which is directly linked to a natural disaster. But the other one, the more common one, is not. Now, it's usually a natural disaster that triggers it, but it's really about whether or not conditions are safe to return those individuals to the country.
Yeah.
And an earthquake in Haiti like that in 2010 or 2009 makes it unsafe. It is an earthquake, but it's really about the safety. And so former USCIS Director Leon Rodriguez testified to this in open court in the Sajay case. Ira Kurzban put him on the stand. It's always been interpreted such that even if the triggering event has passed, and personally, we don't think that Haiti has gotten over the earthquake, but even if they have, it's about whether or not it is safe to then return those hundreds of thousands of Haitians, in the case of Haiti, back to Haiti.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be difficult if you just, send hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of individuals back. But if the earthquake has now led to social disruption, and even though the earthquake buildings have been rebuilt, if a country has deteriorated, then the statute says you can't send them back because it's not safe. And that's the statute they wrote. So it does become difficult. I don't think you can just put a time limit on it. Yeah.
Very interesting. I mean, the U.S. has. I mean, does anyone else have TPS in the world? I don't know. I've never studied it, but it's a special thing that we have here. But that's what makes America different. That's what makes it special.
Yeah, I had a Kuwaiti client. Well, no, I had an Iranian client who never lived in Iran, lived in Kuwait his whole life. But he, can't be returned to Kuwait because Kuwait, you can live in Kuwait forever with work authorization. You can start a family, you can own property, but you don't get to have citizenship. You always have to have a basis to come back. A lot of countries seem to go like that. I don't want to be a country like that. That seems like a cold country.
Yeah.
As I was saying with Judge DiPaolo on the podcast last month, and former Judge DiPaolo and the Otay Mesa Detention Center. I mean, at what point do these people become part of America? That's it. Immigration law should reflect that.
Yeah.
That at a certain point, people become part of American fabric for good or for better or for worse. Immigration law doesn't really think like that at the moment, but maybe it should, because it's hard to deport somebody who's been here for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years even. Extreme and exceptionally unusual hardship notwithstanding. I mean, just a good person. It's hard. That's not who America is.
I guess with that really encapsulates 2020.
That's
What
right.
plans do you have in 2021? I know you're expanding in the San Diego office for your firm. And that's a big job right there, and you're traveling constantly with COVID, so you're braving the flights and going on. Have you been on any flights in the last year after COVID?
I've been on two flights for cases. At the beginning of it, I flew to Dallas in, I want to say it was March or no, April. I flew to Dallas, and I mean it was like five people on the plane. It was another bond case.
Hmm.
And I flew to Dallas and I didn't die. And there was another flight at some point. I don't know. The bond stuff touches me. What about, and so yeah, this year just keep trying to build a podcast, keep trying to build the firm. Hope to get married in May. We've postponed it twice because of COVID. So third time's a charm is what they say.
Yeah. Well, congrats.
What about you? What does your 2021 look like?
So there's some big shifts happening on multiple angles. Like with my firm, going to be growing out of this solo practice I've been doing for the last 7 years in one way or fashion. So I'm going to get bigger, and then focus a lot more of my time on both the education and marketing and letting people know about immigration law, to get more attention that way. And then I have always have side projects. I'm launching the Toolbox magazine, Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine, and so we're seeing what's happening. And obviously, I'd love to have an article or a section by you if you like, and your firm. And so I think I like doing, a lot of my firm stuff's to make money to fund. One is hanging out with my family, and two is doing creative stuff. So the podcast and now the magazine, and just a lot of educational material that I really enjoy the most. And I realized, I've been a professor and I like teaching, but I'm not really that great of a teacher. But what I could do is kind of get other people together who do really good writing and could teach and create a forum for them. So I wouldn't be necessarily have myself as much forward to have other people and to promote them. I think that's a better use of my time. Although I have a lot of listeners who like my method of delivery. But so that's next year. A lot more creative stuff, a lot more money, a lot more.
Yeah.
I'm always pretty blunt about that, and just taking things to the next level. Finding my weak spots and fixing those, and bringing in a team that could help. Because I realized I've hit the ceiling of what I could do when I do everything myself. Literally, I've almost done complete everything myself since I started. And I've grown a lot, but there's a ceiling to that. And if I want to go next level, it's really just working with people and learning how to manage and all that.
Yeah. Before I got on this video with you, I was editing tomorrow's podcast. It's just always something, but it is fun. I
Yeah.
mean, I wish you the best of luck, and what you're doing with the toolbox, it's all over the place and it's really impressive, and you just must never stop. And I like how you said it. You're even your firm and just everything is, just working so you can hang out with your family. It's a good outlook. It's a good may we all look like that in 2021. Think about work in a way that it's just a means to an end to have family time.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm an extremely, what's that word? I had in my mind, it popped out. A person who has big ideas and wants to achieve them, ambitious person. And like to the point that I always thought, like, I'm going to be the head of a biggest company in the world, president, leader of the world, this kind of stuff. And I have the energy and the wherewithal to do that. But, over time, I was seeing people who went after that big a goal. And I saw they weren't usually happy. And what they thought they would achieve didn't happen. And now I was reading the Bible. I like to read the Tanakh and Torah a lot too. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it talks about, like, there's nothing new under the sun. And, like, it's kind of like it sounds negative, but it's kind of like, don't go after crazy kind of stuff. Enjoy the food you have, enjoy what you drink, enjoy time with your family. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing. And so I always put that at the center of things, and then have creative outlets that could help support that and, like, bring out that ambition that I have and the creativity angle. But always go back to that, because I've seen too many people chase after that big dream, and it ends up being more of a facade once they get it. But the ambitions in me to do new things, so it's kind of a balancing act of, I could chase money and make a big firm and make a ton of money, but I've ran into too many lawyers who've done that are really unhappy and are alcoholics, or not to paint a broad picture on everyone does that, but it has to be another primary thing that has to be secondary to what I found. And look what Ira is doing at your firm. Like, I mean, he's obviously very successful as a name, but it always goes back to he's doing impact lawsuits. He's writing a book that makes a difference, and everyone. So it's like all that brings money with it, but the primary goal is to help to push the field along and to help masses of people. And so that's really an example that we could go by.
Yeah, I try. I'm similar, you wanna have a life of meaning. I don't have a family yet, and then I know that'll shift it. You want your life to mean something, and you want to do stuff that's creative. Immigration to me, it's a big, complicated, fun game, and you can help lives. I mean, it's great with that. But and Ira is the same way. I asked him. I took a loss like a year ago, and I'm like, Ira, like when does it stop hurting with the loss? When do you not want to vomit? And he's like, it never goes away. And if it does, I'd be scared, is what he said. And because that means that you don't care as much. So that does make being an immigration lawyer very, very difficult. But like with Ira, obviously he's got the book, and the type of cases and the Supreme Court cases he's taken and all that, the advocacy. But the firm was his brother's. His brother was a medical malpractice attorney, and now his nephew, Ira's nephew, is the managing partner of our firm, and he does med mal. And so the family it's been two things. The firm has been two things. It is two things, immigration and med mal, and they kind of both help fund each other. But at base, it's a family law firm. And I think that's how Ira and his brother do it, such that you don't burn out and you don't become an alcoholic. And that is keep the family aspect to it, keep the bigger picture in front of you every day. I'm certainly trying to learn from them.
Yeah.
Not yet succeeding, but certainly trying to learn from them.
Immigration is so personal and emotional. Like right now, I have these EB cases that the receipts are taking months to come, but like 2 months, and there's retrogression next visa bulletin. So I'm like, it's. I'm sure a lot of lawyers going to hit with malpractice now because they didn't write the check right
Yep.
or there was a missing box. But like if they get a rejection notice and with the retrogression, all of a sudden all these Indians they have to wait another 2-3 years before their time comes up. And I know my case is good because I kept checking the PDF scans, but it's like, just give me a goddamn receipt so I can make sure the case is through. And I mean, they're probably they don't know any better, so they're probably cool about it. But like for me, it's like, dude, a receipt shouldn't take 8 weeks to come. But that's the norm that is happening. So it just stuff stresses me out. And so it's kind of like, and that's just like, that's a little higher kind of stuff. Like when you have your cases where people are detained and their families like worried about them, it's prison at the end of the day. Now, before coronavirus and COVID, like, what if some violent person is in the same cell with them? What if there's a myriad of things that could be problematic? It's very personal. I really always tell people I feel like I'm a family doctor or surgeon in what I do because the consequences are life or death. And even even in investor cases, I mean, you're dead in the U.S. essentially, and even real dead potentially in asylum cases and TPS cases when people are forced to be removed from the country. So it's a very serious subject matter, and it stresses the hell out of practitioners, especially the last 4 years. I mean, a lot of people were talking about leaving. A lot of people did leave. It's a very difficult job to do. But law in general is a full contact sport. It's really hard to do.
Yeah, you can always do more. And sending it out, I mean, I just filed a Noid response,
Mhm.
a huge one. What if I messed up and I missed the deadline? Like, what if they reject it? Like, it's crazy. I think that the solution for a lot of that in both immigration court and USCIS is you got to go electronic. I mean, if you ever practice in federal court, I can see the second that I file that the court has received it.
Mhm.
I have proof of that in the stamp that the federal court gives to it. Now, it might ultimately be rejected, but then that's right immediate, and you get the notification, and then usually, maybe you have time to fix that. There is no reason that we should be messing around with FedEx and 8 weeks to get a receipt in the era of digital, and it's crazy. It has to come eventually. That it's taken this long is keeping us all up at night and turning us into alcoholics.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they tried to do this digitization for a long time now, spent billions of dollars in it. It's their priority goal. Like when DHS talks about number one goal is digital thing, this and that. But they take one step forward, 2 steps back constantly.
Yeah.
Now, I've tried filling out the online forms for N400s and I-90s, and I'm like, why is this so done so badly? I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, you need a forum where you can see everything you file, just like federal court, just like Pacer.
Yeah,
Believe me, federal judges are known tech wizards, but they figured it out.
yeah.
They've had it for 20 years now, almost. But I wish you the best in 2021, all of us. It's been quite the 4 years. I came back to immigration because Trump won, and I'm excited to continue without him.
Cheers to that, and the whole immigration field definitely agrees with that. Thanks so much for just coming on the show and doing this regularly with us. And again, everybody, Immigration Review weekly podcast. It's a must listen to, especially if you're dealing with the federal court kind of stuff and bond hearings. These are one reason I do immigration and bond hearings and removal is because every week it changes, and I'm like, and Trump made the same for USCIS stuff, but I was like, I can't do immigration. I got to constantly go on every law and every circuit. But if you're doing that, I think it's malpractice not to listen to Kevin Gregg's
Oh,
podcast and Immigration Review. So I put the gauntlet down. You got to listen.
John, that is high praise, and I appreciate that. And there's a mind bender on 101A43M, fraud or deceit 10,000 this week out of the Third Circuit that I had to read like twice. Like, what is happening here? So, John, thank you so much, and thank you for continuously having me. I enjoy this. I look forward to it every month.
Awesome. Thanks again, Kevin. Until next month, have a good one.
Bye, you too.
Thank you for listening to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. The Immigration Lawyers Podcast is a part of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, a training and marketing program for immigration lawyers. For more information about that, please email us at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. Also, you can find more information and updates on the LinkedIn page for the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, as well as a private Facebook group for practicing immigration lawyers. You can email me for information about that as well. And also the Twitter page is a great place for updates. Until next one, have a good one.